No one knows exactly when or how human came up with spoken language, but there is one hypothesis that said language began between 100,000 and 50,000 years ago with the advent of modern man, the Homo sapiens, which are us, humans. We are Homo sapiens. And we all know that the origin of the world was written in the book of the Bible, in the Genesis, and that includes our language. Because Bibles first describe language in the context of God creating the world. He was speaking to create the earth, and He gave spoken commands to bring the world into being and to bring dry lands from the water that covered the earth. So, si Lord daw, nagkuhan daw siya, He used spoken language to create the earth. And it says here in the book of Genesis, "And God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and He separated the light from the darkness." So it says here that God created the world with spoken language where He commands the land and the water to be separated. So, ang nari sa Bible kay the language kay nanay siya kung Lord sa world.
Language is the way how human beings communicate and understand each other. It's true. Language is a gift from God to us in order to communicate. That is why language is shown to be a trait of God Himself. The divine source of language. Divinity or divine is a form of higher being, especially in the essence of religion. And language is the principal method of human communication. So question, how God uses language? Based on the biblical reading,
Verses 6 to 8 state, "And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have image to do." The biblical account explains why language is exclusively human and why it is hardwired into our brains and vocal anatomy because God deliberately designed it as such.
In Genesis chapter 11 verse 9, it states that, "Therefore, its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth." So this happened when God got angry to the people who tried to build a tower for themselves to reach heaven. God saw it and praised them, but it was not His plan. So God thought that pride would lead them to destructions, and He made human speak different languages and scattered them all over the earth. So they were scattered among nations, and each nation have their own language.
According to the scripture Revelation 21, God will create the heaven and the new earth. He has communicated this reality to human being in both oral and written form. It is fully evident since the creation happened, God used language in creating us human. Man was given the divine ability to think and translate thought into words, and God allowed Adam to name all the animals. It is very clear that he was completely different from the animals, since he was created in God's very image, and only mankind has a language. In that particular moment, God and Adam shared one language. Bible truly describes language in the context of God speaking in order to create earth. A lot of theories and beliefs that emerge, yet none of them was proven. Remember the Tower of Babel, in which people before has only one language, yet because of pride and disobedience to God, they were punished through confusion of tongue, in which they speak different languages and caused them to scatter across the world.
In theme 4, community, language, and community appear through a scripture. So we can read in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, God created human beings to be in a fellowship with Him and commanded them to be fruitful and increase in a number. Genesis chapter 2 verse 18, God said that it was not good for the man to be alone. So he created a suitable helper, notes various communities, clans, and languages, territories, and nations. So after Babel in Genesis 11, it's clear that there were different linguistic communities. God let the people confused about the language, and there were the beginnings of a foreign language, and up until now are existing. So communities typically reflect differences. So in theme 5, which is sin, in Genesis chapter 3 verse 1 to 5, the devil uses language to tempt Adam and Eve through the twisting of what God had said. It's clear that there are consequences to sin in how Adam and Eve relate to God in the way they will each blame others. So we will read then in Genesis chapter 3 verse 8 to 13. The Hebrew and Babel means gate of God, but sounds like confused. Yes, people rebelled with pride by building a tower and refusing to be escorted. In response, God confused their language, scattered the people, and created a variety of different languages. So we will know that Adam and Eve's disobedience in Genesis 3 was reflected at Babel in Genesis 11. So just as it's in our language used in Cole chapter 3 verse 8 to 9, Jesus teaches that our speech, what comes out of the mouth, it is what makes us unclean, and through our speech, our sin, false testimony, slander, or other as an evidence diversity. In Genesis chapter 10 verse 20 to 31, we read of clans and languages. So in Genesis 11 reveals that in response to seeing God created a diversity of languages, the scattering of people mentioned carried on with the Exodus and Nehemiah on chapter 13 verse 24. It's evident that God's people and their children spoke range of languages. Yes, Daniel studied that language and literature of the Babylonians in chapter 1 verse 14 BCE. In Zechariah chapter 8 verse 23, we find diversity in God's promise to bless Jerusalem. So the diversity of language is evident in the interactions of Jesus in Mark chapter 5 to 41. As Paul wrote, undoubtedly, there are all sorts of language in the world, yet none of them is without meaning. So there is no meaning. The redemption by God's grace Christians wait with hope. After the fall in Genesis, we see God's intervention to deal with sin through judgment, as well as the promise that He would crush the serpent that God communicated